This is not about a nuclear standoff between NATO and Russia. This is not about nuclear weapons. And Ukraine must win. And Ukraine will win. If Russia were to use a nuclear weapon, what happens is that the West, I'm afraid, will be obliged to launch retaliatory action. Emmanuel at one stage said Putin must not be humiliated. And we started from a very different position. You can't negotiate with Putin because he's so patently untrustworthy.
Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom who helped so much Ukraine to fight Russian aggression. This year he has been awarded as a friend of Ukraine, and after the award ceremony he agreed to talk to us. Boris Johnson, you have just been awarded as a friend of Ukraine, and it's well deserved because last spring you've been the first Western leader who visited Kiev. But can you tell me, why do you support Ukraine? Ukraine is quite a remote country from the United Kingdom. Why are we so important to you?
I think it's one of the most extraordinary features of the UK's response is how strong it is. All the people in the United Kingdom have very passionate feelings of support for Ukraine. It's very noticeable. You can see it on buildings everywhere. People fly the Ukrainian flag. And do you know what I think it is? I think it's people were just shocked that an aggressor could attack an independent country like that. I was lucky. I went to Ukraine when I was Foreign Secretary a couple of times, first in 2016 and then I think a bit later. And it's an amazing country. It's beautiful. It was clearly on a different path from Russia. It was clearly a country that had a totally different vocation, a destiny, a different sense of nationhood. I've never seen anything so clear-cut in foreign policy in the last 50 years. You know, I've never seen something that was so clearly black and white, good and evil, right and wrong. And right is on the side of Ukraine. And Ukraine must win. And Ukraine will win, by the way.
We will return to Ukrainian victory a bit later, but may I ask you, when did you personally understood that Ukraine will survive? Because for many in the very beginning, in spring, it was not so evident.
It's very interesting. So I've got to tell you that the advice we were getting before the invasion began, so when the 115 battalion tactical groups were assembling on the border, and it was a horrific scenario, I was getting daily reports from Defence Intelligence in the UK, and I've got to tell you, Sergei, they were not optimistic about Ukraine's ability to hold on. And to be absolutely frank, they told me that it would be over in a matter of days, and that, you know, there was nothing that was really going to be able to stop Putin driving all the way to Kyiv with his tanks in a week or so. But I was skeptical because, as I say, I'd been to Kyiv. I talked to veterans of the Donbass. I thought, these guys are going to fight, and they're very brave fighters too. And they've had a long time since 2014 to learn about warfare. So what I said to my people, they kept saying, it's going to be over soon. And I kept saying, yeah, but you don't understand. I think Ukraine will fight. And I had this argument with other European friends and colleagues.
How did it happen? Maybe you can share some life stories when you managed to convince other European leaders, I don't know, Scholz, Macron, that Ukraine will survive this war and Ukraine will win this war.
I'll tell you, Sergei, I'll tell you how I think we were able to win the argument. Because, let's be in no doubt, I think that some of our friends started in a very different position. So in France and in Germany, they had this tradition of the Normandy process and the Minsk agreements, and they were used to engaging with Russia, trying to persuade Russia and Ukraine to negotiate. After Russia had already invaded in 2014. So they were in a kind of logic of negotiation and trying to find a deal. And if you remember, Emmanuel at one stage said, Putin must not be humiliated. And we started from a very different position. We thought there's only one way out. Ukraine must succeed and Putin must fail. So in the first meeting, I said Putin must fail. And everybody, it took a while to get people to agree to this because they were always going, well, fail? That, that's a big thing to ask for Putin. Everybody's a bit, in my view, a bit superstitious about Putin. They're wrong. But they said it was too much to ask for Putin to fail. We needed to find different language. And I said, no, Putin must fail and Ukraine must succeed. And that means at the least driving Putin out of all the areas he has taken, at the least, since February the 24th. But I tell you how, but let me explain how we were able to win the arguments. It was because fundamentally there was no alternative to Ukrainian military success. Because whenever my colleagues from other European capitals began to think about some negotiation or some peace plan or some deal, some land for peace deal, the idea crumbled immediately in the discussion because you can't negotiate with Putin because he's so patently untrustworthy. And so that argument never worked. And so everybody was always forced back to the only logical conclusion that we had to back Ukraine with everything we could until Ukraine succeeds in getting Putin's invaders out of their country.
Ukraine will win the war, we have no doubt in that, neither you do. But could you let us know, what is the victory for you?
Look, I can't be more Ukrainian than the Ukrainians. And it's in my Ukrainian, even all I can say is Dziękuję and Dobry dzień and a few phrases like that.
Dobry dzień, everybody. I'm Boris Johnson from London.
It's up to you, to the sovereign people of Ukraine.
We do have answers, but you also have your ideas.
I would say, okay, it's up to Volodymyr Zelensky. He has to decide. But I would say that it's going to be, at the very minimum, before you can even begin to talk about anything with the Russians, with Putin, they have to get out to the status quo ante February the 24th.
Let me reflect on what you said about 21st of February as a status quo. I would say that it's more than pessimistic, because losing Donbass and Crimea for Ukraine would be a defeat, a huge defeat. And I would say that it's unacceptable. And in Ukraine, all public surveys show that even losing Crimea is not accepted by more than 90% of Ukrainians.
And I understand that now. I can see the Ukrainian case for recovering everything, for the Crimea, the Donbass, the lot. And I'll tell you why. Because, number one, it's the law, it's the border, it's the boundaries of Ukraine. And it was the second point, it was the failure to observe the international boundaries that was the disaster in 2014. It was because the West was weak, and we didn't stand up for Ukraine in 2014, and we launched this hopeless Normandy process, which got nowhere, and Putin was able to keep twisting the knife in the wound, keep agitating. He saw that in the end he would be able to have another go, and so what I'm saying is I understand the logic of why any Ukrainian would want to get back to the status quo before 2014. I totally understand that.
But will West support it? Will West support our fight for Crimea? Or will West not stop us?
No, look, I think that, first of all, let's help you get back Melitopol and Mariupol Berdyansk and all the land bridge and get that needs to happen first, I think. I think, frankly, once that happens, the geostrategic position will be very, very different. And Ukraine will be in an immeasurably stronger position. And the Kremlin, with Putin, will be it will be very, very much weaker. And I have to say something else. I think that before the war, NATO membership for Ukraine was kind of off the table. There weren't enough people in NATO who would support it, and there were quite a lot of people who were against it. But I'm afraid to say that the one person who has made an overwhelming case for Ukrainian membership of NATO is Vladimir Putin. And by the way, he has not only helped to massively to strengthen Ukraine's national pride and sense of what it can do, but Vladimir Putin has also greatly strengthened NATO. He's made NATO great again, and he now has 2 more NATO members on his western border.
I'm afraid that if Kremlin will return to nuclear threats, that will threaten West so much, and the alliance would not be that much united, even after first threat, not to say after first launch of nuclear weapons. Would you agree with that?
I think that what I noticed when I was doing the job of UK Prime Minister was every time we thought that the Western alliance was going to be divided, I would go to G7 or NATO or whatever, G20, any big meeting, and everybody always said in the run-up, oh, there'll be a fight about Ukraine, the doves and the hawks will disagree. Nonsense. Because of the logic of the argument that I described earlier, we always came out united. And on the nuclear thing, we've sent a very clear message to Putin, and he's heard that message. And it is very important that we don't allow him to transform this into a conversation about a nuclear standoff between NATO and Russia. This is not about a nuclear standoff between NATO and Russia. This is not about nuclear weapons. This is about Putin using conventional forces in an absolutely criminal and barbaric attack on a neighboring country, a sovereign neighboring European country. And all we are trying to do is give our friends the ability to protect and defend themselves and kick the invader out. That's all this is about. We should not be trapped by Putin into talking about some nuclear logic or standoff.
Do you exclude that a nuclear strike can happen?
I think it's vanishingly unlikely. If Russia were to use a nuclear weapon, number one, Putin resigns his membership of the human race. All the middle ground countries that are giving Russia the benefit of the doubt, right? So whether it's in the Gulf or in India, South Asia, wherever, they are not as supportive of Ukraine as I would like them to be, and they are more inclined to be favorable towards Russia for lots of historical reasons. As soon as he does something like that, he loses all that. Plus, what happens is that the West, I'm afraid, will be obliged to launch retaliatory action of one kind or another, which we've spelled out to him.
With conventional weapon.
Plus, you don't go into what you would do. Plus, the current freeze on the Russian economy would be absolutely nothing to what we would do to Putin after he launched a nuclear strike. And it would be an absolute, from the point of view of the ordinary Russians, it would be an absolute catastrophe. Ordinary Russian families would suddenly fear for the consequences for themselves, for the long-term, short-term consequences for themselves and their families in a way they'd never feared before. So that is simply not going to happen. Let me get this point over, okay, and then I'll shut up. But escalation at every stage, and I faced this at the very beginning when I wanted to help Ukraine. Ben Wallace, our defense secretary, and I said, we read Putin's essay. We thought the guy's round the bend, right? We thought this there's something freaky going on here. He really is going to invade. So we decided that we would give the NLAWs, the anti-tank missiles. And our officials said, no, if you do that, you will escalate. You will provoke Putin, right? And that's always been the argument. So like with the tanks or with aircraft, no, you mustn't do this, it will provoke Putin. That argument is, I think, hollow. It's false. What needs to happen is Ukraine needs to be helped with the maximum support, conventional support, to end this horrible, horrible conflict as fast as possible and to free the people of Ukraine and have peace again. That's what needs to happen.
Let me ask a very important question about end of the war. Don't you consider a scenario that Russia loses, Putin is out or maybe in jail, if that is possible, and even Russia dissolves, broken in pieces?
I don't think that we have to worry about Putin's political career. It's not our job to be his advisors about whether he's going to survive in the Kremlin or not. That's not my job. Our job is to help Ukraine to win as fast as possible. And when that happens, I think actually that you look at the polls, you look at the way that Putin controls the media, the organs of opinion in Russia, he will have no difficulty persuading the Russian population that his special military operation has been a special kind of success in a particularly special way that he will explain to them. And he will say that Ukraine has been denazified, right? And so all the Nazis who never actually existed.
Losing Crimea, it's impossible. If he loses Crimea, it's his treasure. He will not be able to do that.
Well, I defer to your opinion, Sergei. I think that he has a lot of political space. He has a lot of political space to tell the Russian people that he's achieved his objectives in Ukraine. I'm not saying it's going to look like a very persuasive case.
So Russia would not dissolve?
I don't think so. No. Why? I think that Russia is a great, proud old country, and Russia is not going to dissolve. But again, I want to stress that the objective of the UK, the objective of NATO, the objective of all Ukraine's friends is not to have any particular outcome in Moscow. Our objective is to protect and help Ukraine and have a free, sovereign, independent Ukraine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson, and thank you from Ukraine that will certainly become member of the NATO and a free, prosperous, democratic state. I believe in that. I hope you do.
I think absolutely, and I think that the path, and the UK looks forward to helping the reconstruction of Ukraine, but also the creation of the new security architecture for Europe that will mean security for Ukraine and also security for Russia as well, and that can be done. Okay, what do you want me to do? Yeah,
we're going to present the award.
Oh, the award. Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, it's a great honor for me, Sergei, and thank you to everybody at Ukrainskaya Pravda for this award, which is an absolutely beautiful object, and I will treasure it. It'll be very useful for attacking a burglar in the middle of the night. Yeah, that's right. That's the right way around, yeah. Yeah. No, it's got to be blue on the. It's blue sky. It's the. You want the yellow at the bottom and the blue at the top. It's very easy. Bye bye. Thank you. Bye bye.